Astrid's life may have looked perfect from the outside, but there was always more going on beneath the surface. Born into a wealthy family, she had access to everything most people could only dream of: private schools, lavish vacations, and a head start in life. She grew up in luxury, always knowing she had an advantage over others. Her confidence and natural charm made it easy for her to navigate through social situations, and she was often the center of attention at any event. But despite her achievements and the praise she received, there was a restlessness in her. She craved more than just success. She wanted excitement, something that would break the routine of her privileged life. This constant desire for something different pushed her into making choices that seemed reckless to others. Astrid wasn't just content with being successful or admired. She needed to feel alive, and that led her down some risky paths. Her family had mixed feelings about her. They couldn't deny her accomplishments, but they struggled with her unpredictability. Astrid had a talent for creating chaos, even when she didn't mean to. To some, she was a star, shining bright and drawing everyone in. To others, she was a storm, leaving drama and conflict in her wake. This combination of ambition and recklessness would come to define her life in ways no one could have predicted. As Astrid got older, the restlessness inside her only grew stronger. Success and admiration weren't enough anymore. She needed something more thrilling to fill the void she felt. For Astrid, the ordinary life that others seemed content with felt suffocating. The idea of settling down, getting married, and living a quiet life terrified her. While her friends started families and embraced stability, Astrid was chasing excitement, something that made her feel alive. This hunger for thrills pushed her into risky situations. She often found herself in relationships that she knew would end badly, but the danger of it all was too tempting to resist. Astrid craved the rush that came from the unknown, whether it was a fling or a bad decision at work. While others saw chaos, Astrid saw the spark that made her feel something. The fear of being stuck in a boring life drove her, and the more restless she became, the bigger the risks she took. Even though she knew these choices could backfire, it didn't stop her. The excitement was addictive. Astrid thrived on the rush of adrenaline, even if it meant leaving behind broken relationships and damaged trust. Her need for more excitement, more validation was a constant battle inside her. The conflict between who she was expected to be and who she really wanted to be kept pushing her toward dangerous decisions, setting the stage for what was to come. On the surface, Elias and Vera Larsson had a picture-perfect marriage. They were the couple everyone admired: Elias, successful and charming, and Vera, steady and caring. They had met in college, fallen in love, and built a life that seemed to be going according to plan. Elias worked remotely for a well-known investment firm, and Vera was a dedicated elementary school teacher. They seemed to balance each other out: Elias, always ambitious and full of ideas, and Vera, content with their simple, small-town life. But behind the happy facade, cracks were starting to form. Elias was becoming restless, much like his cousin Astrid. The small-town life that Vera loved was beginning to suffocate him. He longed for the excitement of the city, the high energy of big business deals, and the thrill of new challenges. While Vera found peace in routine and predictability, Elias felt trapped by it. The differences that once made them strong as a couple were now driving them apart. One major point of tension between them was the topic of starting a family. Vera wanted kids, eager to take the next step in their lives. Elias, however, kept postponing it, using his career as a reason to delay. He always had another goal, another promotion to chase, and this ongoing disagreement created a growing distance between them. They still cared for each other, but the weight of unspoken frustrations was slowly pulling them in opposite directions. Neither of them could ignore the growing tension for much longer. The issue of having children had always been a sensitive subject between Elias and Vera. Vera had been ready for years, dreaming of starting a family and embracing motherhood. To her, it seemed like the natural next step in their relationship. But every time the topic came up, Elias found a reason to push it off. He would talk about how his career wasn't stable enough, or how they needed to save more money, even though they were financially comfortable. For Elias, it wasn't just about practical concerns. Deep down, the idea of being tied down scared him. He saw children as the ultimate commitment, one that would lock him into the very life he was growing to resent. While Vera saw kids as the future, Elias saw them as a limit to the freedom he was already struggling to hold on to. This fundamental difference in their views only widened the gap between them. Their conversations about children became more heated, with Vera feeling frustrated and hurt by Elias's constant delays. She couldn't understand why he wasn't as eager as she was, and it started to create an emotional wall between them. Elias, on the other hand, felt cornered. He loved Vera, but the pressure to start a family made him feel even more restless and trapped. As they continued to disagree, their once close bond began to unravel, making room for more distance and more silence in their marriage. The tension was building, and neither of them seemed to know how to fix it. The Larson family reunions were known for being both grand and chaotic. Every few years, relatives from all over the country would gather at the family estate, a sprawling property that showcased the wealth and status the Larsons had built over generations. At the center of it all was Gustav Larson, the family patriarch. Gustav was a self-made millionaire, and he took pride in the legacy he had created. He ruled the family with a combination of warmth and authority, generous, but with high expectations for everyone. Gustav's approval was something all the children and grandchildren sought, consciously or not. Every success was measured by how it compared to Gustav's standards, and every failure seemed magnified under his watchful eye. At these reunions, the competition for his attention and praise was subtle but ever present. Some family members thrived in this environment, while others struggled to keep up. The reunions were more than just family gatherings. They were stages where old rivalries played out and new dramas unfolded. Over the years, there had been plenty of incidents, some minor, some major. Astrid, always the center of attention, had caused her fair share of spectacles, while other relatives found themselves in the spotlight for various reasons. These events had a way of bringing both the best and worst out of the Larsons, as past grievances resurfaced and unresolved tensions simmered just below the surface. Every time the family gathered, there was a sense that something dramatic could and probably would happen. Astrid knew how to make an entrance, and the family reunion was no exception. As relatives mingled and caught up, Astrid arrived in her signature dramatic style. She pulled up in her sleek, expensive car, the engine purring as she stepped out in a designer dress that seemed to shimmer in the late afternoon light. Heads turned immediately. Whether they loved her or found her exhausting, no one could ignore Astrid. She walked through the crowd with effortless confidence, offering hugs and air kisses to everyone in sight. Her arrival wasn't just another family member showing up, it was a performance. She soaked in the attention, knowing exactly how to work the room. Everyone noticed her, but it was Elias who couldn't take his eyes off her. While the reunion buzzed around her, Astrid's presence added a certain energy to the event. Elias, who had been deep in conversation with his father and some business associates, felt a rush of excitement when he spotted her. He hadn't seen Astrid in a while, and something about her presence stirred up feelings he didn't fully understand yet. As he made his way over to her, trying to mask his eagerness, Vera watched from a distance, sensing the growing tension before anyone else did. As the reunion went on, Elias found himself constantly drawn to Astrid. It started with small, casual conversations reminiscing about childhood memories and sharing inside jokes, but there was something more beneath the surface. Each time they spoke, their connection seemed to deepen. The way Astrid laughed at his jokes, the way she looked at him, it was different, and Elias felt it. He couldn't help but notice how much more alive he felt when he was around her. Astrid had a way of making everything seem more exciting, more vibrant. Their conversations became longer, their interactions more frequent. Elias would find excuses to be near her, whether it was offering to grab her a drink or finding himself standing by her side in the group discussions. What started as innocent cousinly affection quickly shifted into something more charged. The glances between them lingered longer than they should have, and the light touches like a hand on the arm or a playful nudge carried a tension that both of them felt but neither fully acknowledged. Vera, still watching from a distance, couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. Something was shifting, and the attraction between Elias and Astrid was no longer just harmless family fun. It was becoming something far more dangerous. After the reunion, Elias couldn't stop thinking about Astrid. What had started as innocent flirtation at the family gathering quickly became something he couldn't ignore. Soon, he found himself looking for reasons to see her again. Business trips or casual meetups suddenly became opportunities to cross paths with Astrid, and neither of them tried to resist the growing pull between them. It didn't take long for their interactions to turn into something more. Their first kiss happened during one of these chance meetings, a moment filled with tension that had been building for weeks. It was both thrilling and terrifying for Elias. He knew it was wrong, but the excitement of doing something forbidden made it impossible to stop. Their affair quickly became a secret world of its own. They started meeting in hidden places, quiet cafes, secluded parks, and eventually Astrid's sleek downtown apartment. The rush of sneaking around made it all the more intoxicating for both of them. What began as a physical attraction soon turned into late-night conversations and deeper emotional connections as they shared things with each other they'd never shared with anyone else. It wasn't just the thrill of the affair that kept Elias coming back, it was the way Astrid made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. But as their meetings became more frequent and daring, Elias found himself living a double life. On one hand, there was his stable life with Vera, and on the other, the excitement and unpredictability that Astrid brought into his world. He knew the risks, but the pull of the affair was too strong for him to turn back now. As the affair deepened, it wasn't just about physical attraction anymore. Elias and Astrid started to form a real emotional bond. Late-night phone calls became their routine. While Vera slept upstairs, Elias would sneak out of bed and lose himself in whispered conversations with Astrid. They talked about everything: dreams, fears, regrets. In Astrid, Elias found someone who understood his restlessness and dissatisfaction with life in a way no one else did, not even Vera. Astrid, usually so guarded, began to open up to Elias in ways that surprised even her. She shared her insecurities, her fears about growing older, and the pressure she felt to maintain the perfect image everyone expected of her. With Elias, she felt seen and heard in a way she hadn't experienced before. The connection between them grew stronger, more complex, and more dangerous with each passing day. But with this growing emotional intimacy came increasing risks. They were getting careless, meeting more often and being less cautious about who might notice. Elias started making excuses to spend more time with her, lying about business trips and other obligations. The more they saw each other, the harder it became to hide the truth. Elias knew the affair couldn't last forever without something giving way, but the excitement, the emotional closeness, and the way Astrid made him feel were too powerful to walk away from. The risks were growing, but neither of them was ready to stop. They were too far in, and each step they took only made it harder to turn back. It wasn't long before Vera began to sense that something was off. At first it was small things. Elias seemed distracted, distant, and more secretive than usual. He was taking more business trips and stepping out of the house late at night to take calls he claimed were work-related. When she asked him about it, his answers were vague and unconvincing. Vera wanted to believe him, but her gut told her something wasn't right. The changes in Elias's behavior became harder to ignore. He was either overly affectionate, as if trying to make up for something, or distant and irritable. He guarded his phone more closely, and Vera noticed the way he seemed to go out of his way to avoid leaving it unattended. It was all too suspicious, and the more Vera thought about it, the more her mind raced with possibilities she didn't want to consider. She tried to brush off her concerns as paranoia, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. She began to pay closer attention, watching his patterns, noting the times he left the house, and keeping track of his stories. Vera wasn't ready to confront him outright, but the doubts were starting to consume her. It wasn't just work stress or a rough patch in their marriage anymore. Deep down, Vera feared that Elias was hiding something much bigger, and that fear was becoming harder to ignore each day. Vera's suspicions eventually reached a breaking point. She could no longer sit back and wonder. She needed answers. After weeks of quietly observing Elias's behavior, Vera decided to confront the one person she feared might have the truth: Astrid. Without telling Elias, Vera showed up unannounced at Astrid's apartment one afternoon, her heart pounding as she stood at the door. When Astrid opened the door and saw Vera, she was clearly caught off guard. The tension between them was immediate. Vera didn't waste time with small talk. She came straight to the point, accusing Astrid of having an affair with her husband. At first, Astrid denied it, trying to act surprised and innocent, but Vera wasn't buying it. She had seen the signs, the lingering looks at family gatherings, the secretive behavior from Elias. Realizing she was cornered, Astrid's demeanor shifted from denial to defiance. She admitted to the affair but showed no remorse, telling Vera that Elias was happier with her. The two women's emotions flared as the conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. Vera, furious and heartbroken, accused Astrid of destroying her marriage and her family. Astrid, cold and unapologetic, fired back, claiming that Vera had never really understood Elias and had been holding him back. The confrontation was raw, filled with anger and hurt. Neither woman backed down, each convinced she was right. In that moment, Vera's worst fears were confirmed, and the betrayal felt even deeper than she had imagined. The damage was done, and there would be no turning back from the storm that had just been unleashed. After the confrontation between Vera and Astrid ended in tragedy, the police were quickly called to the scene. When officers arrived, they found Astrid dead and Vera in a state of shock, sitting motionless next to her. The news spread fast, and the police wasted no time in launching a full investigation into what had happened. Detective Liam Donovan was assigned to the case. He was experienced, having handled plenty of complicated domestic situations, but something about this case felt different. From the moment he arrived at the scene, he sensed there was more to the story than just a simple argument gone wrong. He interviewed Vera at the station, where she was still in shock, repeating over and over that it was an accident. Her story was filled with confusion and regret, but Detective Donovan knew he needed more than her word to piece together what had really happened. The investigation quickly uncovered the affair between Elias and Astrid, which added a new layer of complexity to the case. Donovan combed through phone records, text messages, and credit card statements, all of which painted a picture of a relationship that had been growing in secret for months. Late-night calls, secret meetings, and hotel stays were all there in black and white, confirming the affair beyond a doubt. As Donovan dug deeper, he also spoke to family members and friends of both Astrid and Vera. The interviews revealed long-standing tensions, both within the family and in Vera's marriage, leading Donovan to question whether the shooting was truly accidental or if it was the result of months of emotional build-up. Surveillance footage from Astrid's apartment building showed Vera arriving that day, tense and determined, adding further weight to the theory that this was no simple crime of passion. The deeper Donovan looked, the more tangled the web became, and it was clear that this tragedy wasn't as straightforward as it first appeared. When the trial finally began, it quickly became the talk of the town. The courtroom was packed with family members, reporters, and curious onlookers eager to see how the case would unfold. Vera was charged with second-degree manslaughter, and the prosecution wasted no time painting her as a jealous wife driven to violence by the affair. They presented evidence of the heated confrontation between her and Astrid, focusing on the text messages she had seen and the growing suspicions that led her to Astrid's apartment that fateful day. The prosecution's case seemed solid. They had the surveillance footage of Vera entering the building, the gunshot residue found on her hands, and witnesses who heard the argument escalate. They even brought in a ballistics expert to argue that the shot was intentional, not a struggle over the gun as Vera claimed. They aimed to convince the jury that Vera had gone to Astrid's apartment with full knowledge of what she was about to do. Elias was forced to testify, admitting to the affair on the stand, his guilt and grief visible for everyone to see. His testimony added weight to the prosecution's argument that Vera had been pushed over the edge by the betrayal. But the defense didn't give up easily. They painted a very different picture of Vera, one of a woman broken by months of emotional pain, who had gone to Astrid's apartment simply to confront her, not to kill her. They argued that the gunshot was a tragic accident, the result of a struggle that got out of control. Their ballistics expert countered that the angle of the shot could support Vera's version of events. The defense also highlighted Vera's emotional state, showing the jury a woman who never intended for things to spiral into violence. Vera herself took the stand, her voice trembling as she recounted the confrontation. She spoke of her heartbreak, her confusion, and how everything had spun out of control in a matter of seconds. Her genuine remorse struck a chord with many in the courtroom. She insisted that she had never meant for any of it to happen, she just wanted the truth. The jury was left to decide whether Vera was a cold-blooded killer or a heartbroken woman caught in a tragic moment. After days of deliberation, the tension was unbearable as the jury returned with their verdict. The courtroom was silent as the foreman read the decision: not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of second-degree manslaughter. Vera was sentenced to 6 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 4, leaving the courtroom and the family deeply divided over whether justice had truly been served. When the verdict was finally announced, the courtroom was filled with a heavy silence. The jury found Vera guilty of second-degree manslaughter, and she was sentenced to 6 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 4. For some, it felt like justice had been served, while for others, the sentence seemed too light. The decision sparked immediate reactions both inside and outside the courtroom. Elias sat in shock, his head in his hands, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on him. His affair had not only destroyed his marriage, but had also torn his family apart and led to the tragic death of Astrid. He was left grappling with guilt and shame, knowing that his choices had set everything in motion. The Larson family, once united by their wealth and prestige, was now divided. Some family members stood by Vera, believing she had acted out of deep emotional pain, while others couldn't forgive her for what had happened. Old resentments and rivalries came bubbling to the surface, and the family gatherings that were once filled with laughter and competition were now marked by whispered arguments and strained relationships. Public opinion was equally split. The media had followed the case closely, and people had strong opinions about Vera's punishment. Some believed the sentence was too lenient given the crime, while others felt sympathy for Vera, viewing her as a victim of circumstance, a woman pushed too far by betrayal and heartbreak. The case sparked debates about infidelity, emotional trauma, and how far someone can be driven before they snap. As Vera was led out of the courtroom, her future uncertain, the Larson family was left to pick up the pieces. The ripple effects of that one tragic moment would be felt for years to come, leaving scars that would never fully heal. For everyone involved, life would never be the same again.